Hello, everybody. Thank you for sticking around for the congregational conversation. Just an update on the pizza. It's going to be here in about 10 minutes, and then we'll give everybody a second to eat, and then we'll start the congregational conversation. So enjoy the conversation, and talk to you in a few. All right, everyone, if you haven't seen, the pizza is here. It's ready to go. The line is very short. So grab your pizza, sit down. I'd love to start in the next 5 minutes to be respectful of everyone's time. So again, grab your pizza, sit down, and we'll have our meeting in about 5 minutes. All right. It looks like most of you have gotten your pizza, but if you haven't, there's still a little left. But we're going to go ahead and start this congregational conversation. So let's dive into it. Ryan, could you give us the next slide? All right, the agenda. We are going to cover the congregational survey. We're going to have a report, get all the findings from it that we did end of last year. We'll have a mid-year financial update, then pledge drive update. Safety committee will have some, we'll get to talk about what's going on there, and then the visioning process that the board is leading this next year. All right, so without further ado, Katie and Nancy, I'll turn the time over to you. Thanks.
Well, I want to publicly thank everybody on the survey committee who reviewed all the data. There's a lot of data to review, and we do read every response. And I also want to publicly thank everybody who took the survey. It did take some time. It's not just a quick 1 or 2 question. We dive in. So. One of the things that's a little bit different in our survey this year is that we asked about 3 different areas that are specific. I think last year we talked about how we were going to do an overall survey, and then we have 6 areas that we will rotate we'll do 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. And so that's what we did here, and we'll get into a little bit more of that in a minute. But we had 149 members and friends of the congregation fill out the survey this year, and that's about 58% of our membership. And so we were excited to have that. That is a couple less than we had. Well, last year I think we had 154. And so that is still a great number of people who filled out. Okay, next slide, Ryan. Okay. The bottom line, the overall results that we got were that the congregants here love their community, they love the values, and that there is a high overall satisfaction with what we're doing here. We recognize that there are specific operational limitations due to being severely understaffed, and we have amazing committed volunteers, but they are feeling stretched. But everybody does see a lot of opportunities for improvement that are clear and actionable, and everyone's ready to work on those solutions. You can go to the next slide. So, who shared their voice? Now, there will be a more detailed report available in the next couple weeks where you can get in and actually see all that specific data, but we just didn't want to bore you with all that really specific data, but there will be a place for you to go and do that. But 64% of the people who responded, and again, this is not necessarily regarding our congregation, but people who responded, 64% of them were 60 or older, 28% of them were 40 and 59, and 6% were under 40. And the tenure, 46% of the people who responded are long-term members, right, 13 plus years, and 25% of them 4 to 12 years. What was exciting about this survey is that we had a lot of essentially what we call newer members or new people who've been coming here. So they may even not be members. So that was, almost 25%. So that's good. We got people that are newer members or new here that are engaged. And you can see that 80% of them were members and the rest were friends or newcomers. So that was exciting. And 80% of the people who filled it out were pledge annually, and 50% of them volunteer regularly. And you can see the majority of them attend Sunday services regularly, either in person or online. Next slide. Alrighty. So remember, this is a snapshot in time, right? So a lot of things have happened since October 2025. Sorry that I'm looking at that slide now, and that's hard to read. I'm so sorry about that. But the key findings were that the baseline satisfaction is strong. 72% of our congregants who filled out the survey find that we are always or almost always fulfilling our mission. And that was consistent across all age and tenure levels and attendance patterns. Then our greatest assets is that we are a warm and welcoming community. Somebody just mentioned that to me earlier, that's gone to another congregation here in the Valley, not to diss another congregation here in the Valley, but they chose to come here because it was the feeling was warm and welcoming. The assets is that there was lots of recognition about the music program improvement and the stability of that program. We identify as a very strong social justice identity, and that again was across all viewpoints, ages, and demographics. Opportunities for growth were the faith formation transition, the communication and trust building, stewardship stabilization, and worship development. And some of those things, of course, came up for growth because we asked more questions about them, because we are going to be diving deeper into those issues this spring. And the other thing that came out of the survey is that we are healing, healing but not healed, and that's not uncommon in any kind of healing process, and that the communication effectiveness is extremely correlated with our trust and healing processes. Oh, next slide. So when we dive into faith formation, if we look here at the numbers, we had 138 people respond on faith formation. So because it's a long survey, faith formation was actually the last thing we asked about, and so there could have been some fatigue where a lot of people didn't respond, or they just didn't feel like it pertained to them. But 28% of the people had children actively participating in the program, which meant that the majority of the people that were responding were thinking about the adult program. So the request for improvement in the adult program was 3 versus the children's program was 3 to 1. Parents of the program have a very high, satisfaction rate. And people who, and I say non-parents, that means parents, people who don't have children actively participating in the program. Not that they don't have children, but they are, have a lower response rate for that. And then but people under 40 have their highest, because those are probably people who have children in the program. What do they say that they want? Is that 57 respondents talked about how they want more regular classes for adult faith formation. They want spiritual growth. They would like small group discussion, online options, and parent support resources. Children and faith formation, they are requesting for paid staff to help with the stabilization and attendance and focus on the high school program. Remember, this is October. We did not have a staff member. We now have a staff member. So look at us, we're already solving problems that we identified. Whoop. So, and then there was also 25 people that talked about creating intergenerational and spiritual practice opportunities. So, go to the next slide. So some of the barriers that we talked about, the first one, of course, is time. Right? Everybody's pressed for time, and so location was another thing. It takes time to drive here. 22 people mentioned about whether they felt like it was relevant to them as what is being offered, and then just energy, motivation, and personal circumstance. And of course, it goes across all age groups, and whether they're talking about the children's program or the adult program. Next slide. So then the next opportunity for growth was Sunday worship. 107 people talked about worship, And 90% of them did state that spiritual life is extremely important to them, and that 42% of our people who responded say they have a regular practice that's either weekly or daily or several times a week. When people described the worship, the highest one was thought-provoking, welcoming, it was related to daily life, it was inspirational, and it was comforting. And that the important elements to make a good worship service is the sermon. The next highest one was that the music was important. Also the community connection, focusing on our values, the UU values, lay reflections, the importance of silent reflection, and ritual and ceremony, where those were the things that came up from the highest rated of importance to make a good Sunday worship. Next slide. So when we asked about, hey, what could we do? What could the team that puts these services together do to make it better? I just want to point out there was only 56 people out of the 107 that responded that gave feedback on improvements. 51 of them just left that question blank. And so 53 were constructive criticism and 3 expressed complete satisfaction. So, but when people were asking for how to better create a Sunday worship experience, they talked about having more inspirational and transcendent messages and rituals around the sermon, increased storytelling, a better balance between contemplation and social action. It wasn't an either or, it was just a better balance. A greater asking for theological depth, some of our denominational history, and use of different types of media and presentation styles. The next one was music. There were 13 comments about music. There is mixed sentiment, as you can imagine, in a large congregation about what music should look like, right? Some think there's too much, some think there's not enough. And so we'll be taking this to the music team and the Sunday worship team to kind of take in those things. There, again, I mentioned earlier, there were comments about the praise for the stabilization of the program and rebuilding of the choir. Community connection was our next comment for improvement opportunities, and that is to create better fellowship opportunities, like follow-up and interactions with newcomers. And I know that there's a committee that's currently working on that with Doug. So, and that's a newer committee as well, right? So we'll be passing that information on to him. And then there was 9 comments about just pacing, length, things like that. Next slide. So the next opportunity that came up most often was the communication and trust. They're kind of separated out here, but they are linked, right? So communication helps with trust, and trust, of course, helps with communication. So there were 13 people 40 people mentioned or comment about communication, and that was that, and it's not, again, surprising to hear that the different generation has a different preference in how they need to be communicated with. 26 people talked about our event and program information, talked about outdated website information, or needing a centralized communication on what's happening or how to get involved, and also a clear path to membership. People talked about communication of decision makings over the last year, and how sometimes they felt that the rationale communicated around those decisions wasn't done in a way that was proactive, to let the congregation know before they were implemented. They felt opaque or sudden, and that the operational inconsistencies, is impacted by the staffing, of course. Then there was praise, 6 comments about praise that they have seen in improvements in communication and listening since 2024. And then the issues of trust, 18 people mentioned issues around trust, healing but not healed, right? That they're asking for acknowledgement that the transitions that we've been through going back to the UUA and Andy's issues, the recognition that those are difficult, those have been difficult transitions, that that recognizing that harm occurred, and to validate those that still feel that they need it, and continuing to carry on the healing processes that we started with Reverend Sam. And then there were 14 comments about trust and leadership. And again, mixed sentiments. Some people have praised the leadership, and some are still feeling that they are feeling left out. Next slide. The last opportunity was that for growth is stewardship. And again, we have, this was a snapshot of 2025. And so we since have had a large campaign, and that team should be recognized and applauded for all the work that they have done. And so again, this is not reflecting since, what's happened since October in October till now. But 107 people commented on stewardship. Of the people, the people that filled out the survey, their regular pledgers, you can see how that's kind of broken down. And we do have a lot of people who are extremely committed here, not only financially, but with their time and their talent. They said that, we are 59 respondents, so a little over half said that we're extremely effective or somewhat effective in recognizing the stewardship and commitments, and the other half essentially said there's room for improvement. And then what would help people get more engaged, giving their time and talent and treasure? We had lots of different things. Less than half said, hey, I'm good where I'm at. And the rest just talked about flexible options, means different pathways to do it. Making sure that we're communicating the spiritual connection of giving our time, talent, and treasure, and making that connection community and clarity. Inclusive opportunities like, having it so that you can bring your kids, or that you can participate online. And then training and support. Sometimes people want to give their time, talent, and treasure, but just don't know how, right? And so, and also recognizing and appreciating. Next slide. The areas that people identified in ways that they'd want to get involved, the ones that most areas where people want to get involved in are social justice. Then the next one is fellowship, Sunday worship, music, fundraising, and admin and leadership. And if you don't think that if you mark that, you're going to be getting a phone call from those committees to get you more involved. So what congregants suggested that would help with the stewardship efforts here in the congregation is financial transparency and communication, right? So, and we do a lot of communication, but it's not getting to our recipients in the way that I think that we're hoping. So there were 31 people that talked about that. And spiritual connection, 22 people talked about that we need to somehow connect it to us, our spiritual selves, and how we show up spiritually in the congregation. Flexibility and accessibility, shorter commitments, family-friendly opportunities, and accommodations like online, and then impact and recognition. 28 people talked about that, allowing people to know how does their contribution actually impact. Tell us what we did with your money. Tell us what we did. Tell you what we did with your money, and then also recognizing the people that give. Next one. So, at the end of the day, where we go next is that, first I want to make sure that everybody knows, we oftentimes, in a very heavily volunteer-led organization, things can understandably fall through the cracks. Our goal is to make sure that this information just doesn't just sit here, that it gets passed on to the committees that oversee these things, right? And make sure that we implement them, right? That we're not just filling out a survey and then it's, doesn't get to where it needs to go, but we actually are able to use these suggestions, and that the people that, the committees that run these things make sure that they get that information so they can meet the congregation's needs. So we're presenting today, and then the hope is that this spring that we'll dive deeper and we'll do smaller group focused groups around the faith formation, stewardship, and worship. A lot of that has already been happening now that Will Bliss is here, and the strong stewardship committee that's happening. And then in May, we'll go over those results that we get from some of those smaller meetings. So, questions? Yes. Oh, thanks.
Wait, we should use the microphone.
And by the way, we have a longer form that we'll be putting out, and we are very lucky to have a professional statistician with Nancy to help. She put in all sorts of really fun stuff of how to interpret the data, and that'll be fun to see. Yeah.
Is the board and the staff and other leadership seeing these results basically now for the first time, or have they been shared with them way before this?
That's a great question. They were shared with us in December.
In other words, before the holidays?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the survey was closed, I think, on October 31st. Then for a month, we went through all the data and compiled things. We compiled a report, and then we presented it to the board in December. Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi. Was there a real effort at getting the newer members to fill out the survey?
Yes.
'Cause I know the more dedicated members would, but what about the newer members?
Yes. So what we did different than last year, even though we got less, only by 6 surveys from last year, what we did different this year is that we did get a lot more new members, and I think it's because we send out the invites by text. So in addition to emails and passing out here in the sanctuary, is that we did send out text messages. So newer members or younger members, that's their preferred mode of getting information and asked to complete things.
Other questions?
Okay. Yeah, Bill.
Is this on? Mm-hmm. How is the board going to use these results in terms of strategic planning for building on the welcoming culture that we're so famous for?
Yeah. Can I respond to that? You betcha. Come on over. You want me to just here?
So the assessment committee is a board committee. The role of the assessment committee is to gather the data and give it to the board. One of the things that is interesting is that our board is a policy board, so you've hit on a very important point, Bill. It is the strategic planning that the board is most involved in. Mark may want to say more about this when he does the next part of the agenda. It's important to think about the fact that strategic planning doesn't usually, it may if there's a glaring obvious issue, but doesn't usually peel direct individual question survey results. But your point is well taken in the context of the fact that we are considered by most to be pretty welcoming. And that's a brief comment on what we saw as a strength. The strategic planning part is influenced by the fact that it's very needed, and we've evolved a lot in a lot of different positive and negative ways since the last time our mission, vision, ends, and whatever else went in that process was evaluated and worked on in, I believe it was 16. So we've got 10 years under our belt with all of our current statements, and it'll be interesting to see what looking at those results in. And Mark, I'm going to stop there. Katie, do you have anything else?
No, except that, yeah, it is a board committee, and we do pass that information on, and I know that we've got a goal this year to set our visioning, and which Mark will talk about later, and we will be looking at this, so, yeah. And then the rest of the stuff, we'll make sure, as a board committee, it's also our responsibility to make sure these results get to the people that need to see them to make changes, right? The membership committee and the Sunday worship committee and volunteer committee. Thank you, Deanne, for putting that together, because those are program committees. So, all right, thanks, guys.
All right, Ryan, next slide, please. The following one. Right, David, I'll turn the time over to you for our mid-year financial update.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you can see from the slides, the expenses, at least in the first 5 months, the overall budget does look decent. Expenses are under control, and we're getting pledges in. As noted, December pledges are down, so the mid-year numbers won't look quite this good. There's about $40,000 in savings, so that is less than a month of expenses. So this isn't one household, this is a lot of households, right? In the first half of the year, we had savings in staff. Whereas there's some staff members we weren't paying for. And off budget is $30,000 special fund grant to fund the Director of Faith Formation. So keep that in your mind for the last slide that we have to offer. All right, next slide, please. So here's a little more detail on the income numbers. As you can see, pledges and contributions are very good. Thank you to everyone who has contributed to VUU. Remember, again, this is just the first 5 months. We don't have December data yet. Unnamed contributions, of course, that's cash. That's ahead of budget. That's always fine. When you look at miscellaneous, think primarily that's fund. So that will change dramatically in the next couple of months. And rental income is always a little bit under budget. We plugged in the wrong number for Montessori, and we had a little over-optimistic about how much we would rent the space to occasional renters. Okay, next slide, please. So here you can see in some detail what the expense savings were. You can see a lot of it came from staff-related categories, even though we've had some overages and things like tech booth and teachers. For the most part, we've seen savings in staff. The savings in administration, I think it just comes from one expense that we haven't plugged in yet. UUA dues are going to be $1,000. That's less than 1/10 of what the UUA wants us to send them, but that is budgeted for a little later in the year. Mortgage, as you can see, is on the money, and the rest of these expenses are pretty close. Committee expenses generally are under budget. Okay. One more slide, please. So a little disclaimer before we look at any of this. The pledge drive is not done. It's almost done. You can almost put a fork in it, but not yet. So final numbers are not known. I'm going to have to sit down and calculate those. The December income was of about $40K. We had almost $54K budgeted, so that's under. So that will affect the mid-year numbers. If I were to take a guess, the final numbers haven't been calculated yet, but contributions budgeted for 2020 627 will probably be about 10 or 20K more than they were for this fiscal year. So that's, in a way, good news. That's 10 or 20K more to work with. But inflation will likely eat most or maybe all of that up, depending on what budget choices we make. So we need to remember our goal was 75K increase this year. So that means some of the things we talked about doing in our pledge drive are simply not going to happen. What we don't want to do is make any more hard choices if we can avoid it. As you remember, in last year's budget, we made some pretty steep cuts to some core staff, mainly the director of faith formation and the director of music ministries. We don't want to cut those anymore if we can possibly avoid it, because that would have more serious consequences. One thing that can help us do that is if we have a positive carry forward. That means if we have a surplus in this year that we can carry forward to next year. That would look like an increase in the savings account, increase in the checking account, and pledges coming in at the same rate they have in the first half of the year. That would take some pressure off of the budget decisions that we're going to make. Like we said, staff raises are unlikely. What else? One of the things to remember in all of this is that there is a 30K hit to the budget because that's a special funds grant. The director of music ministry will come back on the budget next year. The thing that'll work in us favor would be a positive carry forward and more pledge income. The thing that works against us is inflation. I know for a fact UUA healthcare is going up 20% beginning this month. That's an extra about, I'd have to look at the bills when they come in. It's probably going to be in the neighborhood of an extra 10K per year hit on our budget. So that isn't friendly. So what are some things that we can do? And I'd be happy to listen to what anyone has to say. 50-50 mortgage payoff, you see what that would do and when it would help us. What else we can do aside from raising more revenue is eventually we're going to need to live within our means. And that means more help from volunteers, ultimately. Any questions? Okay, Ann.
Thank you. It's pretty obvious, the point next to last, that the mortgage payoff would make a huge difference. This has been on the agenda for years. Why don't we do it? Now, my question is, this would require the special funds to agree to it, the board and the congregation, but someone needs to start this process, folks. Because if we paid off the mortgage, that saves $50,000 a year.
Okay.
So my question is, will the board take this up and put it on their agenda to get this process started?
It's on the January agenda, right? So Mark's a step ahead of you.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that point, if you have an opinion on this subject, the people voting on this exact issue in January would be your board representatives. So get their ear and talk to them and get support for the idea that you think is the right one. Jim had his hand up next. Yeah.
David, I think that you said that there was a 30K grant for faith formation. Was that correct, or was that?
Yes. Yeah, director of faith formation. No, director of music. Director of music. I'm
music
sorry.
Ministries, not faith.
Director of music ministries. You're right. DMM.
So I just, for those who don't know, and also to clarify, I think the idea for the 50-50 mortgage payoff is to have a capital campaign where special funds would match donations from congregants. So if we have a $500,000 mortgage, if the congregation came up with $250,000, special funds would come up with $250,000, and we would have it paid off. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'd like to strongly argue against having another capital campaign. I think we should we have a decent endowment. We should take the money from the endowment and pay off the mortgage, period. At that, I'm old enough and been in this, a member long enough that I remember when we didn't have 1 penny of endowment. It was Bunny Clark who started the endowment, and we planted a tree, which is still there, in front of the Warner Church. We now have about $900,000 or more in the endowment because it's been well supported and well invested. And I think a lot of us paid a lot of capital money to get this place in the first place. I took out a second mortgage for my contribution. I really believe we should simply pay off the mortgage and liberate $50,000 a year. We still will have a decent endowment, and then the endowment will build. But I think asking for the congregation to do another capital campaign to match the endowment is deeply, deeply wrong.
Just quickly, it was the last Congregational Committee meeting, maybe a whole year ago, maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, someone said, well, we could use the endowment to pay off things, but we've got to get the congregation to do something first. I agree with Mary, don't do that, folks, because it hasn't happened. Nobody picks up the ball to do it. When we've got the money in the endowment, let's pay off the mortgage and try to get ourselves out of this fiscal problem.
Okay, I'm not a financial expert, but I think there was some question about the amount of interest that one was making, versus what you'd lose if you paid that off. You wouldn't have that interest growing on that amount that you used to pay it off. So someone, needs to look at this like long range and past range as to the current interest rate.
Okay.
Also, there was...
a little factoid on that, our interest rate on the mortgage went up from 4 and change to 7%. So you can typically get reliably anywhere between 7 and 10% back in the stock market. So the fact the interest rates have gone up have made that calculation a little more favorable for payoff.
That was my question as well. We all have questions about should we pay our mortgage off at some time in our life. And it depends on the capital that we're going to use to pay that mortgage on. How much are we receiving? If the interest rate's 4 and we're getting 8 from the stock market on average, then it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to pay off the mortgage. But you're saying it's kind of a wash at this point, or the income received is slightly higher?
Well, Carl has his hand up, so I will defer to what he says next.
Before we do that, I know Bill.
Yeah, I concur with what the last two speakers just said. It would make, in terms of investment and return on investment, actually, the analysis that I've done, and forgive me for sounding like a broken record, we would save much more by investing in solar and transitioning away from our dependence on the utility generation for electricity than we would save by paying off the mortgage.
Yeah, I think this is really worth talking about. The thing that I'll say, the input that I would just give is that let's take the money side out of it if we're going to say that it's a wash between interest. The other thing that the endowment has done is that it's provided money for many projects here, over $250,000 worth of projects over its lifetime that could not have been done because they weren't in the budget. The other thing is that we have provided a backstop. We set aside dollars over the summer because we weren't sure we would be able to meet our payroll. We're forwarding the money to the safety committee to be able to buy the improvements that we want to make here for safety. That's hopefully going to be reimbursed, but it's not necessarily going to happen. The congregation voted to allow us to turn that from a loan into a grant if that didn't happen. So I don't want to come in on one side or the other. I just want to say that there are many factors to take into consideration when we have the discussion. And I think we need to do that. And I think the board is going to be doing that. So, you know, I think the piece Mark said about your input, send an email to Mark and give him your ideas, because this is all going to come up. And I think, you know, I really believe that we need to make the decision as a group. The argument that I make for not just giving the money is that I think some form of having the congregation participate in the process is community building, and I think that's kind of a you can't measure that, but I think there's some value in us as a group getting together and making some kind of special commitment to that, to feel like you're part of the process. So that's all I'll have to say for now.
This is an excellent discussion. It's been going on for several years. It's on the board's agenda, and we're not going to solve the problem in this meeting. I suggest, if possible, that we move on to the next item on the agenda.
Are there any other questions about the state of our finances as of now? Okay.
So a quick follow-up on the whole emailing me thing. If you do happen to email me, and just so you know, my email is really easy to find. It's markfoot@gmail.com. But it would be way better to email board@vuu.org, board@vuu.org, and it'll go to all of us at the exact same time, so that there's no question of, like, did everybody get it or did I pass it on? But if you do email it to me, I'll just forward it to board@vuu.org anyway. So that's how to get a hold of us. But let's move on with the agenda then. Okay, next item. Pledge drive. Now, Debbie wasn't able to be here, and this isn't a heavy numbers review, but I did want to point you to this beautiful graphic. You get an update every week in the happenings with the latest and greatest numbers. So this is from this last happenings. Now, what have we done and what are we doing? Well, we already celebrated. We got the bulk of the work done in that we did the cottage meetings and collected 128 pledges, which is huge. Now, the work of the stewardship committee is not done. Now they have to write handwritten thank you cards to every single person who's been so generous with their time and effort. So I'm really thankful for that monumental effort, and it really matters. So they're starting on that, and they're going to continue with follow-ups. Letters, phone calls, emails, connect with everyone. And I think this is, I wanted to point out a couple things. One, we don't expect the last people that we're contacting to significantly change the numbers overall. But a pledge is a commitment to be part of this community, and it doesn't matter the dollar value. I look with respect on a person who's struggling financially and they commit $1 because that's all they feel that they can. They pledged, and they are in equal standing with everybody else who pledged. So if you're in this room and you haven't pledged yet, pledge anything. And if you know somebody who hasn't pledged yet, make it a topic of conversation. So encourage people to pledge. But it's also an opportunity for us to make sure that we connect and have a good understanding of who still considers themselves part of our community, and it's an opportunity to check in with everybody. So that's what the stewardship committee is up to. They are connecting with every single person that we have considered as part of our larger community. So friends included, obviously. Okay, so we are getting weekly happenings numbers. Now, what do we do with all this information? You are going to see a draft budget at the Congregational conversation on May 3rd. At that point, you'll see what the Finance Committee has put together with the board's priorities, trying to represent you on where to spend our limited dollars. We'll see as much as we can get. And also, a big part of this is the carry forward. Like last year, we spent more than we had budgeted. So that meant that we carried forward a negative number into the following year, which weighs down everything that we can spend. So that'll all be factored in, but it's never done until it's done. You'll see the final budget on our annual meeting on June 7th. So please put that in your calendar, plan on being there. And then lastly, we're now moving to an 18-month schedule, which is great because we don't have to do another pledge drive for a year and a half or a couple months from a year from now, which is great. So we'll start doing this again in 2027. Can't believe we're talking about 2027 already. All right, next. Actually, go back. Any questions before we go to the next slide? All right, you guys have been very patient. Let's zoom through this. Safety committee. So David, could you give us an update on all our safety committee projects? And we'll go from there.
So as you can see, most of the safety upgrades for our facility are done in terms of infrastructure. The fencing, I have a couple questions about. You'll see there's lots of nice new fence around the playground, but by the admin building, I didn't see the new tall fence. So I will be asking the administrator about that next week. Bollards will be going in next week, I think next Monday and Thursday, correct? Monday and Tuesday. So next time you come, next week you come, we'll have these big, beautiful bollards protecting us on the patio. Now that we put the stuff in, now comes the hard part. We need to get the Department of Homeland Security to reimburse us. So the committee has some paperwork to do, a final report to do, and make sure all those submissions are done through the state office, pass it on to the feds. And now we need to start using all this equipment we have. So there is a lot of things we need to do to actually implement keyless entry, to wisely use the radios, to actually get everyone trained on what to do in the case of a natural disaster, an ice raid, an active shooter, whatever. Do we do some fire drills, do disaster preparedness drills? Do we make investment in some more things like AEDs and combat first aid kits? How do we best leverage the equipment that we have? We're only part of the way there. The rest is now setting up training and getting people interested and trained and ready to use these things if it ever becomes necessary. So anyone who wants to be part of that ongoing effort, make sure you let someone know. And that someone at a minimum would be Debbie Simpkins, or that you could probably talk to Nancy or myself. So if you want to be part of that ongoing effort for a while, that would be very much appreciated. What have I skipped over? I don't think I've missed anything. The overall budget actually came in below what we thought we were because there were some things we didn't need, so we've been very economical with the state's money. They should be proud of us. So any questions? Tom? Oh.
Yes, my suggestion is, can we set up a safety at VUU.org site so that we don't have to remember to send it to Debbie or you?
Oh, you mean email address?
An email address, yes.
Okay. Mark, can you do that? Okay. All right.
Thank you. Sorry for...
Any other questions, comments? Great. Moving on with the agenda. Okay, so this is mostly an FYI to have us all be reflective. A word about our organization. There's a lot of text up here, but it's nothing actually new. I pulled this exact text from our website, which I'm very familiar with. So we're a mission-driven organization. What that means is we're not here to make profit. We're here to make the world a better place. Our mission, as it stands right now, is love is our doctrine, service is our prayer, and justice is our calling. Now, I'm not sure if that specific mission wording was established in 2016, but the mission plus vision and ends was all established in 2016 by the board through a process of congregational input. And this matters. It's not just nice words, but if we're operating the way we designed ourselves to operate, well, we have a mission, which is what drives us today and as an organization generally. We have a vision, which is where we're going in the nearish future, or what the world we're striving for. And then we have our ends, which are specific pillars that we are trying to work towards, that we expect the minister to, since the minister is responsible for doing the programming, we expect the minister to implement these different things, and then we try to build them into everything we do, and we try to frame our whole organization with this eye to our mission and vision. So our current one is a few years old, and it's not like anything is wrong with this, then I think I agree with every word on this page. But it is a healthy organization that looks at their mission, looks at their vision, and looks at how they're achieving those periodically and says, does this still align with what we are about? And if so, the decision to hold fast to those things we love is a good decision. And if not, if there are more relevant ways that we can frame how we understand ourselves, it's valuable to do that. So we're going to review that. The board decided that we're going to figure out what this process looks like this year and really kick off a plan starting at the annual meeting this June, with all the steps to get us to a new mission and vision. So it's going to be a year-long process. We're kicking it off at one annual meeting, and we should vote on the final product a year from June. So long-term, this is not, we want to be thoughtful about it. We want to make sure that this really makes sense for who we are. So please take some time to read it. If you want more time with this, go on to our website. It's at VUU.org/ well, when you get there, it's about VUU, mission, vision, and ends. It's a little buried. Maybe we should talk to Communications Committee about making it more prevalent. But yes, that's what we're about, and I wanted to let you all know. And similar to the finance discussion, if you have an opinion about this, by all means, email board@vuu.org, and then all the board members who are voting on this stuff will get that information, and we can be thoughtful about it as we plan out how to get to this updated mission, vision, and ends. Okay, with that, what questions do we have? I think that was our last topic.
I'd like to know exactly how many members we have now, because we have fewer members than we had 4 years ago. And the salaries for staff are partly based on UUA levels of membership. And I'd like to know what we have and if we have changed levels, which I suspect we have.
Could you be my runner?
I'd be happy to.
Most recent number, Andy? It's 250? Wait, who said that?
Hello, it's 256.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. 256. Okay, and yes, it is true that maybe a year and a half ago, we went through the list and we removed members that had passed away or moved away or no longer wanted to be associated. And this list is going to be ever-changing. On that topic, the other part was, it's true. We try to be a good employer, and part of that is that we pay market rates for our employees. Now, we don't have a lot to compare against other than we've got the UUA that gives us guidelines for different geographic areas based on your congregational size. And annually, we expect the
personnel.
Thank you. That's why I need a whole committee. Personnel committee performs a review. They look at the recent guidelines from the UUA, compares it to us, and gives us a report. And then we build in, as best we can, fair market rates into our budget. Because, well, for example, if we lost one of our employees, being able to attract a new employee we'd have to pay market rates no matter what, and it's just not fair to our employees to pay them below that. So I will say that our last review, we did not, even though we changed our position within the range, we're still within that same range. I don't remember what letter it is. David.
So mid-size one, as I remember, went from 250 to 350. So we're right, we used to be on the top end of mid-size one. Yeah, we were very close to mid-size two. Now we're on the bottom end of mid-size one. So that's the bureaucratic fallout.
The last time before we calculated this year's membership, we had right around 300 members. So I don't think we were at the top of that. I think we were right smack dab in the middle of it. And in my history in the congregation, which I finally realized my name tag says was since February 2005, I don't think we've ever hit 350. Close, not, but I don't think we've ever quite made it. Maybe 3 or 4 off.
Can you clarify when you say 250, is that 250 households? Or if there's spouses, it counts as spouses as well if they're members? How does that?
It counts people who have signed the book or contributed a certain amount and made record of themselves. And I don't know how that second part works, but you can get there without signing the book some kind of way.
My memory is that the high water mark was somewhere just over 300, around 306, 308.
So we, per policy, we do review our membership and we try to update those every year. Normally we try to complete that in January with Sarah being out. We'll complete that process when she gets back.
I just think that whatever we were in the past, we aren't now. And what we are is what we are now. And what we should be looking at is what we want to be in the future.
Okay, any other questions?
No, are there any ideas that people have, like to increase membership? For example, are we suggesting each of us bring a friend or ask a friend?
I think that's a great suggestion. We should each bring a friend.
Carl, I got a statement about it this week, and I'm not going to speak from that. Can you give us the current endowment amount? My understanding was it was right around 870 or some such like that. You want me to look at the statement? Okay, hold on. Hold this.
Ryan, that's the last topic, right? Okay, just making sure I wasn't missing anything. We can, there we go. Well, while Nancy looks up that one number, I want to thank you all for making this congregation what it is. I am really grateful to come here on Sunday and just see so many people I know and love. I'm grateful to have a community, and I hope you all feel the same. So thank you, and have a great Sunday. Any luck? Well, if you're really curious about the number, I'm sure Nancy will find it, so don't leave, but